In his world, they called him Batman. Behind the mask was Bruce Wayne, a billionaire with no powers at all, only a genius mind, and a war he could never stop fighting. And then he woke up 3,000 years in the past, in a world ruled by gods who could kill him with a single thought. He woke face down in a field of golden wheat with the taste of bronze and dust in his mouth, and no idea that the sky above him was already full of things that were watching. There was no city here, no tower, no allies, no name that anyone in this world would know, just him, in strange dark clothes, in a land that had been dust for 3,000 years. A farmer found him. He pointed a shaking hand at the horizon, at a mountain so vast it tore the clouds in half, and whispered the word like a prayer and a warning at once: Olympus. That was where the thing that had dragged him through time was waiting, on a throne at the top of the world, and to get home he would have to climb it, past every god that had ever been worshipped and feared. But he knew something they did not know that he knew. A god can be hurt by a man. The Iliad says so. On the plains of Troy, a mortal named Diomedes once drove a spear clean through the god of war, and Ares fled the battlefield screaming, bleeding, crying to his father like a frightened child. One mortal did that. Once. He only had to do it 8 more times. And in the world he came from, he had lived by a single rule: he never killed. Olympus would take that rule from him, and it would cost him far more than he ever expected to pay. He did not march on the mountain. A man with no army and no powers does not march on 12 gods and live. So he did the opposite of everything a hero is supposed to do. He vanished. For weeks, no one saw him at all. In the cliffs above the sea, he found a cave, deep and cold and forgotten, and he turned it into something this world had never seen. No machines, no miracles, only what the ancient world could give him: bronze and rope and fire and poison and patience. On the wall, in charcoal, he drew a map, a mountain, and 12 figures around it. One by one, he meant to cross them out, because he carried one advantage no mortal in history had ever taken into a war with the gods. He knew them. In his world, these gods were only stories, myths a child could recite before sleep. Every grudge, every vanity, every weakness their own legends had written down, 1,000 years before any of them would be born to have it. He had already read the last page of all their stories. They had not. So he did the only thing that made sense. He went looking, not for a fight, but for information. He walked the roads in a beggar's cloak. He sat in the back of winehouses and listened. He learned which villages had burned, which daughters had been taken, which roads the gods still walked in disguise to amuse themselves among the mortals they ruled. He built a map of their habits, the way he had once built a file on every dangerous man in his city. And he did not pick the strongest of them first. He picked the one who could ruin everything, the one who, the instant he smelled a threat, would race to Olympus and warn the rest. The messenger, Hermes. Kill him quietly, and the gods would not even know the war had begun. He found him on the road to Arcadia, in a winehouse thick with smoke and noise. At first, the god was just another traveler at the back of the room, until he noticed the stranger at the dice. He never lost. Not once. All night the coins slid his way, and when a farmer finally accused him of cheating, the stranger only laughed and moved his hands quicker than eyes could follow, and the farmer's own knife was suddenly tucked in the farmer's own belt the wrong way round. He drank like the wine would never run dry. He pulled a serving girl onto his knee and would not let her go, and no one in that room was strong enough or brave enough to make a god stop. From the shadows he watched, and he saw the things the drunk god did not bother to hide: sandals that never quite settled on the floor, the way the lamplight seemed to bend around those 2 quick hands. This was no common cheat. This was Hermes, the fastest thing alive, bored and drunk, and certain that nothing in all creation could ever touch him. So he did not reach for a blade. A blade would never land. Instead, he sat down across from the god, and he said the one thing a creature that vain could never let go: that he was fast for a god. That he had heard the messenger had lost a step. That a real runner would have left a contest this small behind hours ago. The room went silent. Hermes smiled, and there were teeth in the smile. A race, then, from here to the top of the far mountain. And the god, drunk and grinning, never once stopped to ask why a mortal would bet his life on a race he could not possibly win. What Hermes did not know was that the road ran through a ravine he had spent 6 days turning into a tomb. Nets, soaked in sticky birdlime, strung between the rocks. A counterweighted log, heavy as an ox, rigged to a trip line at the exact height of a sprinting god. The race began, and in a single heartbeat Hermes was gone. A blur, a laugh, a cloud of dust, and for one sickening moment he thought it had all failed, that the god was simply too fast for the world itself to catch. Then he heard it. The crack of a log, the shriek of the snare. He found Hermes deep in the ravine, tangled in birdlime and bronze, the fastest thing alive, brought down by nothing but his own speed. It was not clean, it was not kind, but it was done. He took two things from the body: the winged sandals, not to fly, he had no use for flight, only to move without a single sound. And the harp, the curved, adamantine blade that, in the oldest story of all, Hermes once lent to Perseus to cut the head from Medusa. A blade that could cut through anything. One god dead, and not a soul on Olympus had heard him fall. But killing a god leaves a mark on the world, and it leaves a mark on the one who does it too. With Hermes gone, he had a window, a little time before the others noticed that one of them had stopped answering. He did not waste a moment of it. He had heard the same story in every wine house on the road, a war in the north, in Thrace, that would not stop. Two mortal armies that should have made peace a year ago, bleeding each other white, season after season, because something walked between them and fed on it, a warrior on no side at all, who killed for the pure joy of killing. He went north, and he saw it for himself, a giant of a figure wading through the slaughter, laughing, painting himself in the blood of men who could not even slow him down. Ares, the god of war, drunk on carnage the way his brother had been drunk on wine. He had a plan. He always had a plan. But a plan is one thing, and standing in front of the god of war is another thing entirely. He stepped into Ares' path, and the god simply looked at the small dark figure that dared to block him, and attacked. No warning, no strategy, just a single blow that should have ended everything. He got the shield up in time, barely, and it still threw him 20 feet through the air and cracked 2 ribs when he landed. Ares laughed. To the god, this was not a fight, it was sport. And that was exactly what he had been counting on. Because Ares had been beaten before, and the way he was beaten had been written down. 2 giants, the Allidae, once stuffed the god of war into a bronze jar and left him there, humiliated, helpless, for 13 months. Ares was all rage, and rage never looks where it is going. So he ran. Wounded, bleeding, every breath a knife in his side, he ran, and he let Ares chase him, taunting him, daring him, until the god charged blind across an old smith's yard, and the ground gave way beneath him. A covered pit, dug for exactly this. And over the snarling, thrashing war god, he rolled a great bronze cauldron and sealed it shut with the smith's own fire. And then he stood there, ribs broken, shaking, listening to a god scream inside a jar of bronze, and he finally understood the thing he had been refusing to see, and his city he had never killed. He had built his entire life on that one line he would not cross, but Ares would not stay in that jar forever, and a god you do not finish is a god who comes back for everyone you failed to save. So he did the thing he had sworn he never would. He made certain the god of war would never get up again. From the seam of the jar, he gathered the blood that leaked out, ichor, the strange, shining blood of the gods, proof that they could bleed, and the key to forging a weapon that could make them bleed again. 2 gods dead, 2 crosses on the cave wall, and a rule he could never take back. His weapons were failing him. A mortal blade chips on divine bone, scavenged bronze cracks. If he was ever going to climb that mountain, he needed armor and weapons made of something that could survive a god, and there was only one forge in the world that could shape metal like that. It belonged to Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, on the volcanic isle of Lemnos. He crossed the sea to find him, and what he found there surprised him. Hephaestus was not cruel. The smith was lame and slow, thrown from Olympus as a child for the crime of being born imperfect, and left to labor alone in the dark, making beautiful things for gods who only laughed at him. For a moment, and only a moment, he wondered if this was one he would not have to do at all. But the smith served Olympus, and Olympus was the wall between him and home. And the forge was full of the smith's wonders, bronze giants like Talos, automatons that woke at a single spoken command and obeyed without a thought. So he did not fight the smith with his hands, he would have lost. Instead, he forged a false command, a counterfeit of the god's own voice, and turned the smith's own creations against their maker. It did not come easy. The automatons nearly crushed him twice before the trick took hold. But in the end, the smith of the gods was driven back into the cooling channels of his own forge, trapped by the very things he had built. And then he stayed. Alone, in the greatest forge ever lit, he built the thing the legends would never forget. Celestial bronze and unbreakable adamantine, hammered into armor over long, sleepless nights. The sandals of Hermes worked into the boots. The blade of Perseus at his hip. The blood of Ares folded into the steel of a new blade until it could bite a god. A round shield, polished mirror, bright. And from the forge wall, he took the weapon the smith was most feared for, an unbreakable net. The same net that once caught 2 gods together in a trap not even they could tear. The cave in the cliffs had made him a hunter. The forge made him something this world did not yet have a word for. By now, Olympus knew. Hermes did not answer. Ares did not return. The gods understood, at last, that something was loose in their world that was hunting them, and they sent the one among them who had never once failed to find what she chased. Artemis. He did not find her. She found him. He understood it slowly. A forest gone too quiet, birds breaking from the trees in the wrong direction, and then a single arrow that hissed past his throat and told him he had already been the prey for hours. The huntress had never lost a hunt in her life, and she did not intend to begin now. The first hour nearly killed him. Her arrows found the gaps in the new armor, her beast drove him exactly where she wanted him to go. He was bleeding again, cornered, running out of forest and out of tricks. But there was one thing her pride could never imagine, that the prey had read the ending of her story too. That the huntress could be hunted. So he stopped running, and he set a trap inside her trap. He let her drive him precisely where she believed she wanted him, and her own beasts wandered into her own snare lines. His mirror shield threw false shapes across the silver moonlight, and she spent arrow after arrow on a shadow. And when she finally closed in for the kill, certain, triumphant, the ground opened beneath her into a deadfall she had not set. From the huntress, he took the silver bow that never missed. There was still one thing he needed to know: where, on that endless mountain, his way home was kept, and which god would be standing in front of it. And there was only one place in the world that could tell him: the oracle at Delphi. So he went to ask the future a question, and the future was already waiting for him. Apollo, the archer, the sun, the god of prophecy, had seen him coming from a long way off. He already knew how this fight was supposed to end. He was sitting on the temple steps when he arrived, golden and calm, an arrow already knocked, smiling the way you smile at a story you have read 100 times before. And for a while, the god was right about everything. Every move he made, Apollo had already answered before he made it. Every strike met empty air. Every feint was punished. You cannot beat an enemy who knows what you will do before you do it. And slowly, surely, the sun god took him apart piece by piece. So he stopped trying to win. He did the one thing prophecy can never see. He did something insane, a move with no logic, no reason, no thought at all for his own survival, the kind of move no sane fighter would ever make, and so the kind of move no prophecy could ever predict. He threw the whole fight into the black mouth of a sacred cave where the sun god's light could not follow, and there, in the dark, he turned Apollo's own brilliance against him, a blinding flash off the bronze shield. The same trick Perseus once used to behead a monster without ever once looking at her. In the dark, a prophecy is just a story about a future that is never going to come. From Apollo, he took the golden arrows of the sun, and out in the villages, his name had been changing. The frightened whisper they first gave the winged shadow in the dark. Nycteris, their word for a bat, had become something else entirely. They had watched a masked figure tear down the very gods who burned their fields and stole their children, and they had given him a new name: Dikephoros, the giver of justice. The next god did not hide, and did not need to be found. The whole coast already knew where Poseidon was, because the sea would not stop trying to swallow it. Villages drowned at high tide that had stood for 100 years. Boats went out and did not come back. The god of the sea had felt his brothers and sisters dying, and his grief came ashore as walls of black water. He went to the coast, and for the first time he truly wondered if he had finally found a god he could not beat. Poseidon was not a man-shaped thing he could trap in a ravine. He was the ocean itself. Earthquakes, tides, a scale that made everything he had done before feel small. The first wave alone nearly drowned him and tore the shield clean off his arm. But even the sea has a weakness, if you have read enough. Poseidon was strongest in the water, and on dry land, the further from the waves, the weaker he became. So he ran inland, bleeding in half, drowned, and he made the god follow, taunting him, drawing him up and away from the sea to the cliff, top temple at Cape Saunion. And there, where the ocean could not reach to save its master, he let Poseidon's own rage do the killing. The god struck the earth to crush him, and he brought the temple's great stone columns down on the god instead, timed to the tremor with levers and counterweights and a patience no god had ever needed to learn. From the rubble, he took the trident, the weapon the Cyclopes forged, the spear that splits the earth. 7 gods, and the 2 hardest of them left. He went to Athens, to the Acropolis, because the last thing he needed before the mountain was the one thing only she could give him: Athena, wisdom, strategy, war itself, made flawless. The only mind in that entire pantheon that was the equal of his own. He could not outthink her, because whatever he planned, she would have already planned its answer. So he did the only thing left to him. He beat her by being worse. He threw away every advantage. He broke every rule of war that she herself embodied. He made a move so reckless, so stupid, that her perfect strategy, built, always, for a rational enemy, simply had no answer for it. and when he finally had her beaten at the very edge of his blade, he stopped. He had lost his one rule a long time ago, but he had never forgotten what honor looked like, and Athena had fought him with nothing else. So he let her live, the only one he ever spared. In defeat, she gave him the secret that would kill her king. She told him that Zeus, lord of the sky, mightiest of them all, was afraid, not of titans, not of lightning, of betrayal, of his own family dragging him down from his throne, the way they very nearly had once before, when Hera and Poseidon and Athena herself put their king in chains. And then, the very moment he turned to leave, she did one thing he did not see. She sent out a warning, not to Zeus, to the other gods of the other worlds, because she understood what he did not yet, that a mortal who can kill gods is a danger to every heaven there is. And so he climbed. He had spent the whole war making each death look like something it was not. Not murder, the opening moves of a coup. By the time he set foot on the slopes of Olympus, the king of the gods was already half mad with suspicion, lashing at shadows, trusting no one, exactly as Athena had promised he would be. He had not just killed 7 gods. He had turned the 8th against the entire world before the 2 of them ever met. Zeus opened with the only weapon that had ever truly mattered, lightning, the thing no mortal has ever survived. But all the way up that mountain, on every ledge, he had been planting rods of adamantine and chains of bronze, a lattice, a net for the sky itself. And the king's lightning struck them and bled away, harmless, into the rock. Bolt after bolt, wasted, the mightiest weapon in all of creation, turned into nothing but weather. And then Zeus stopped throwing lightning and simply fought him, and this is where he should have died. The suit cracked, the shield split straight down the middle. One blow shattered the bones in his arm, another opened his side to the bone. He went down onto his knees in his own blood, one breath from the end, and the king of the gods stood over him to finish it. Everything he had taken from 7 dead gods, and it still was not enough. So he did the last thing he had left. He goaded the king into one final, all-or-nothing bolt, and he caught it. On the mirror shield, he channeled it down the adamantine spear in his ruined hand and drove the blade into the king of the gods at the exact instant Zeus's own lightning lit the steel. The god died on his own mountain, by his own power, killed by the one thing he had never once believed could threaten him, a mortal who simply refused to lose. 12 thrones, all of them empty. The artifact on the throne came alive, humming with the light that would finally carry him home. He had done the impossible. He had won, broken, bleeding, barely able to stand, but alive and free. He turned toward the light, and the sky tore open. Not with lightning this time, with color. A roaring bridge of rainbow fire crashing down onto the summit, something older and stranger than anything Greek, the Bifrost, and out of it stepped something new, broad, red-bearded, a great hammer in its fist and a storm in its eyes. Athena had kept her word. She had warned the others. The Greek gods were dead, and the next Pantheon had already come to collect the one mortal in all the worlds who had learned how to kill a god. He had conquered one mountain of them, but the others had been watching all along. They were never gods, they were only powerful, and every world that had ever worshipped power had just learned his name. If you want to be there when he meets the gods of the north, subscribe and hit the bell so you'll know what happens next. Live it firsthand.